Hello students, my name is Moon and this is He200, the EMT program here at Queensborough Community College. This is the first lecture of the semester. There will be some administrative issues for the first day of the semester, but that is not in this video. There is one very important administrative issue though, which is that you must be on Brightspace to do anything here as a Queensborough Community College student. Brightspace is the website you're looking at right now. Once you log in, you should see at least these two courses here. One is for the lecture, one is for the laboratory. If you don't know how to log into your Brightspace account or don't know what a Brightspace account is, then you really need to contact your Queensborough IT support or Queensborough Brightspace technical support in order to ensure you have access. You cannot do anything here at Queensborough Community College without your active and good Brightspace account. Okay, so you would be thinking that the first thing you should be checking in your as a Queensborough EMT student should be this page, and you would be right. Let's click into that. Once you get into the lecture segment of this course, you will be taken to the course home, which is this screen. And as you scroll around, you'll see this image of this gentleman here. And this is Dan Armstrong, the program administrator for the EMT program. All questions and issues are directed to this person. And you will see him for half of the lectures. He usually lectures on Wednesdays for your course. I am Jonggu Moon, this is me, and I am a lecturer and I am one of the other instructors of this course. I will usually be teaching on Mondays, which is why you're seeing this lecture now. In order to contact me, this is my email address. You'll notice that there's no telephone number for me, and although administratively I do have a college assigned phone number, it goes directly to my office and I'm rarely ever there in the office. So what I did was I took that phone and I configured it to always say, the answering machine is always going to say, the best way to reach me is by email. When you email me, I promise I will get an answer to you within 24 hours or one business day. So I've mentioned Monday lectures and Wednesday lectures. So what exactly is the schedule? And for that, let's go all the way up here to the course outline. From a phone, maybe this is the more convenient way to view this website. But if you're from a laptop or better, Chromebook or better, then you would probably be like me and you would rather be seeing this screen when you click on content. And what happens with content is you takes all of those widgets that you saw before and it lines them up into a very nice left navigation bar, and then you can click back and forth. And since there are no pictures involved, then everything fits more tightly onto the screen. Anyway, we're at course outline, which I already clicked on, and here you see QCC Spring 2026 schedule preliminary. Click on that and you see the schedule. So here is the first lecture of the semester, etc. If you're watching this when it's not Spring 2026 but from another time, then your dates will vary, of course. But what's common across all EMT classes in Queensborough is that I will be teaching on Mondays, Dan Armstrong is teaching on Wednesdays, you have skills on Saturdays with Kevin Rummel, and the pattern repeats all the way to the end of the semester. Again, if you're not seeing this in Spring 2026, then your dates will be different. But otherwise, the sequence of everything is pretty much the same. I would also normally recommend that you print this out, but during the administrative time at the beginning of the semester when everybody's together in person, a copy of this schedule is usually handed out. So wait for that. Okay. One more thing I should show you about my lecture videos, and I will demonstrate with this study tips video. When you click on this, you get this video, this YouTube link. Play it.
Hello students, my name is Moon, and this is Study.
Okay, so you can watch this on your own time. I need to say a couple of very important things. The first thing is, people have told me that I talk too slow, and I agree. Yes, I do talk too slow. I think I'm talking as fast as I can comfortably go, but every time I watch myself or listen to myself on video, yeah, I talk too slow. So if you feel the same way, something you can do here on YouTube is go find this settings widget, and then playback speed, and then change it to something a lot more along your liking. Like for this one, nowadays I've been listening to myself at 2x.
Tips. I created this video and this lecture slide for the benefit of those who have either not had a chance to build up some basic rudimentary study habits or have been out in the workforce for so long.
Okay, so much more tolerable. Okay, in fact, after I learned this trick a few years ago, I've been listening to a lot of other YouTube videos at least 1.5x, if not faster. About the only thing I listen to at normal speed nowadays is music videos, and only new music videos. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing I want to show you is, yes, I do have a YouTube channel, and notice my banner page. Please do not subscribe to this channel. It's only for my students. But this is really, do not subscribe. So I think I'm the only YouTube content creator, and I use that in air quotes, content creator, that I do not want you to like. I do not want you to subscribe. After all, this is only educational lecture material. I'm not doing this for aura farming or whatever it is you kids call it nowadays. It's not monetized. If you do get an ad for my video, one of my videos, it's not me doing it, it's YouTube. So sorry about that, but I have no control over it. I will never monetize a video, etc. Okay, the reason why I do not want you to subscribe is because if my subscriber count gets too high, I start to attract attention from hackers, from trolls, from other malcontents over on social media space. And also, if you go to playlists here, you'll see that there are several other classes I teach. So you can't be in all of them, right? So if you subscribe, then you'll get notifications for videos that I post for my other classes, which have nothing to do with you. It's wasting your attention. And besides, if there is a video for you that I want you to watch, then I'll post it on my Brightspace page. So please do not like, please do not subscribe, and I recommend that you watch my videos at a higher speed. Well, this is the first lecture of the semester, so let's see about that. What are quizzes, what are homework assignments, that's going to be handled again during the administrative portion when everybody is together. So, daily lessons is your first go-to, and you see day 1 introduction to EMS. So you see day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. BLS review is a very good thing to check out before this Saturday. Anyway, and so you see now chapter notes, which is like an outline, and then an introduction to, and I'm in the chapter 1 lecture slides. And this is your first go-to for lecture slides. That said, let me go all the way back out to your Brightspace login screen, and now let me direct your attention to the laboratory segment of this course. You click on that instead, go to contents, and now you see that there is a bunch of other stuff here. Now it does say laboratory only because that's the name of the course, Brightspace app. But your skills your skills segment doesn't use this website much. So I kind of took it over. So think of it as the lecture Brightspace is Dan Armstrong's area, and this laboratory website is my area. I will make it active soon, as soon as I upload this video. So go to content, and this is nothing here is official or mandatory for this program. This is all like supplementary material, other nice ifs, document handouts on various topics, skills handouts, and advice that you're going to be finding useful later, more study supplementals, and even like a segment on study tips that you can check out for yourself if you like. For the very first, you don't have to look at this entire thing again. None of this is mandatory, but check out this video at first. For those of you who are not that confident about your study habits, your study strategies, and you are open to suggestions. You're willing to consider other people's advice about how best to study for this course. Enough dallying. Let's go to modified lectures. Okay, so over in the lecture segment, those are the official, unmodified, downloadable lecture slides from the publisher of your textbook. And what I do whenever it's my turn to give a lecture is that sometimes, let's go look to lecture 1, modified group 1. What I do sometimes is modify the slides as I see fit, and then I post a version of those slides up here for the students' benefit. So I would rather be teaching from these slides for lecture 1. So click on that, and here we are, and we're ready to begin. All the other lecture slides that are modified, you notice that it's already up there. So for those who want to read ahead, I would say go to the textbook. But after you have read the textbook, and you know that I'm on schedule to give the next lecture, you can go find what lectures I'm going to give on the schedule, and then read ahead on the lecture slide version that I uploaded, because it's going to be slightly different. Not a lot different, but slightly different. Anyway, let's get into this. Welcome to Emergency Services, also known as EMS, and thank you for your interest in helping other people who are having medical emergencies. You will become one of the first responders to an emergency scene. Sometimes what you do might make the difference in saving a life, but only if you do the right thing at the right time. This course is about how you will learn what to do and when to do it. Here's some title pages. Here's a little bit of history that you can read for yourself. This is interesting stuff, especially if you're into the history things. But this is how EMS became what it is today. So, I will take this opportunity now to tell you that my lecture style is not to throw up a wall of text and then read it to you as if you were in grade school. We are all adults here. You have all had a high school education or better. You know how to read this for yourself. So I'm not going to spend your time doing this. And I will also then make this comment that you really must be reading the textbook. You really must be reading the textbook 3 times at the very least. You really should be reading the chapters before the lecture, and then after the lecture, the night after the lecture or soon after, you read it again. And then as you're studying for the quizzes and exams, you read that chapter one more time So 3 times. And each time you should be outlining, annotating, making any other notes in a system that works for you. So do not rely on my lecture alone or anybody else's lecture as the only source of information for you to try to pass this program. That is impossible. There is not enough time in all of our lectures together where we can cover everything you need to know to take care of a person well, and especially and not even enough time to learn all the things for you to pass the major state exam that you will have to at the end, after the end of this program, in order to be an EMT. The only way to get the information all the information you really need to know is to read the textbook and study, study, study. As you read Chapter 1, you're going to run into these acronym organizations. And learning this for the very first time, these letters mean nothing to you unless you've heard NHTSA, the phrase, in like news reports about accidents, major newsworthy highway accidents, and etc. But anyway, this is not the only organization you will learn about here in Chapter 1. There'll be many, many others with different responsibilities. This one has like 10 responsibilities. And the New York State exam to become an EMT will expect you to know all of this. So instead of reading all 10 points to you and explaining what these mean, I would encourage you to read about them in your textbook. And now here is a pro tip, a hack for these different alphabet organizations. Have a separate paper, not text file, not online app, but a piece of paper and a pencil or pen. I would say pen because you want to get used to having a pen around as an EMT student. But anyway, every time you run into one of these alphabet organizations, you write it on the piece of paper, and whatever the textbook or the slides or the lecture says about that organization, write what it says next to it. And there's going to be a lot of alphabet organizations out there, especially NHTSA and NYDOT, New York State, NYSDOT, New York State Department of Transportation. There's going to be NREMT. There's going to be a bunch of other alphabet organizations. And maybe your powers of memorization are so good that you remember this one, but what about the other dozen organizations that are out there? And eventually, by the end of the first chapter, and definitely by the end of the fourth chapter, there are going to be way too many alphabet organizations for you to remember, especially for quizzes, exams, and then the state exam. So instead, have this piece of paper, and every time a alphabet organization shows up and something is said about them, you write it on that piece of paper. When you're done, you're going to have one or more pieces of paper of raw data, which is just random pieces of information about organizations, and the organizations may be mentioned multiple times across your paper. So what you do now is take a new fresh piece of paper and now organize all these facts by organization. What's going to happen is, once you're done with this, there are two wonderful things that are going to happen as a result. You will have a piece of paper that organizes all of these alphabet organizations on one piece of paper. It's one point of reference, and you will have that from now on. You will notice in your textbook it doesn't do that. And every time you're wondering, that's another alphabet organization, what does this do? And now you have to hunt through every page of the chapter. You're going to be hunting through the index and the glossary, and you're going to be Googling. And the problem with searching for answers online or with artificial intelligence is that they don't know what the test question author meant for you to remember. They're just AI is just telling you what it thinks is true, which is not always true, not what the test examiner wants you to remember. So you're going to be at a loss. But by creating this one piece of paper, you have like the single point of reference. The other wonderful thing that results from this exercise, all this effort, is that the act of putting in the effort is part of memorization. You have actually accidentally studied. That is what studying is. And when your brain sees how much effort you put into something, it's going to think, that my human is putting all this work into it. It must be important. And it's going to put this thing from short-term memory into medium-term memory. That's what studying is. So you don't have to do it this way, but I've been in this industry for almost 20 years. So if I have to give you one piece of advice, that's going to be it. Just write things down, make outlines, and put effort into studying, because your brain interprets effort as importance. Okay, so what happens when you call 911, between when you call 911 and when the ambulance shows up and after, and that is the EMS system. No human being is Rambo. In EMS, Rambo is a negative term, is a pejorative. It's not something to be proud of. You are not an individual, you are part of a team. If you try to do everything yourself, bad things will happen. Either you'll do wrong by your patient, or you may even get yourself hurt. Or even worse, you can get your partner hurt. And so what you need to do is remember that you are an important part of a machine, but you're not the whole machine. When the call goes out, it first goes to the 911 dispatcher, and then the 911 dispatcher figures out it's a medical emergency, so they send it out to the emergency medical dispatchers. The EMDs then figure out which assets are available, which units are available, and then which one is the closest and the most appropriate, and then they send the responders. And then that's you guys. And then if it's a especially complicated emergency, they may call for extra resources. Anyway, the patient is finally extracted, moved to the ambulance, and now the ambulance hits the road and gets to the hospital, the emergency department. So we call them the ER, emergency room, out of culture and tradition. But a few years ago, they said, we're not just a room, we're a department. And so they officially changed their name to ED. And slowly, the generations are shifting over to calling them the ED, but us old-timers are still used to calling it the ER. And then after they are stabilized in the hospital, like they're not going to die right away, then they are stable enough for transport, then they can be transported to a specialty center or discharged to home for follow-up at a specialty center, or sometimes, if the situation justifies it, the patient can be sent directly from the scene where the emergency happened directly to a specialty center, and you will learn to know what the difference is, which is which. Okay, for example, specialty centers here. What if somebody is not going to die like right now, like within a few minutes, however, their burns are so bad that if you went to an ordinary trauma center, they're going to shrug and say, we'll do what we can, but we're not a burn center. And so they'll stabilize a patient who's already stable, mostly, but what are they going to do? They're going to call for another ambulance to transport this patient to where they were supposed to go in the first place. So if you have somebody who is sufficiently burned but otherwise nothing else is going on, then you really should go directly to the burn center. How will you know the difference? You will learn that later in one of the other chapters. If you transported a child to emergency department that has no pediatric facilities, what are they going to do? They're going to do as much as they can, but they're going to say, why did you bring this kid here? You really should have sent them to a pediatric center. There are such things as pediatric trauma centers. So knowing when to transport which kind of person to which center is very important, and you coordinate with the dispatcher as well as the doctors who are available by phone call, and then send them to the appropriate center. So this is the kind of scene you could see at the ER, ED, and by this time you've already transferred care, right? This is not us. This is after the patient's been transported. Let's see. So, what kinds of medical services are available in your community? Well, our community here is Queens, New York. Unless you're a real trooper and you're hoofing it over from one of the other boroughs, then you're like, yeah, man, that's impressive that you like our program that much when other EMT education programs are closer to you. But anyway, that's our community, and that's mostly the 911 system, municipal EMS. How important is it that the personnel know the capabilities of community facilities? Because you don't want to send the wrong patient to the wrong center, after all. And what happens if you send them to a wrong center? Then they can't do the best that the patient needs according to evidence-based medicine. The facility will try to do as best as they can, but they are just not equipped to do the best that science has proven. So pictures that you can find on your textbook and look up yourself, but this is pretty much the sequence that I just described. So you call 911 and you get a 911 dispatcher who forwards it to the EMS dispatcher. Okay. Emergency medical dispatching is an entire profession by itself. Yes, they start out as an EMT because how are you supposed to know what your resources can do if you're not one? But they don't have to move on to like be paramedics or higher. The EMT is good enough. But then after that, those who want to can go into a special school to learn how to be a dispatcher. And then the rest of their career, they're in this nice air-conditioned, climate-controlled room, working 8-hour shifts. But before you envy them too much, you have to understand this is a very stressful job. There's at least two kinds of stress. There's many kinds of stress, but the two kinds of stress I'm talking about is there's one stress where most of you and I have experienced, where we're on scene in a medical emergency. We have one person in front of us who's decompensating and everybody's freaking out. That's one kind of stress. Dispatchers have a different kind of stress where maybe they're not viscerally living the emergency scene of the individual, but they're seeing all of this trauma and tragedy going across their screen, across the district they're responsible of. And they are responsible for making sure that the appropriate resources are going to the appropriate times, and then they're second guessing themselves. Are they doing the right thing? It's like trying to juggle plates in the air and making sure none of them crashes to the ground. Completely different kind of stressful living. I tried this in a amateurish way. After I became an EMT, for a couple of years I worked as a volunteer, and that volunteer agency had the contract for a major baseball stadium, like very large baseball stadium, capacity 30,000 people. And so I was there for almost every home game in that stadium. And I don't even like baseball. I was there to get EMS experience. And many of those games, I first volunteered to be the dispatcher for that game, but then I ended up being the only one willing to do it. So I kind of got stuck into that role. Very stressful for me. I did not like it. After our contract was ended by the stadium, I never volunteered to be a dispatcher again. I just did not like that kind of wondering, second guessing myself, trying to keep track of a lot of different moving parts at the same time. My personality is to focus on one problem and only one problem, block out everything else until this one problem is fixed, and then move on to another problem. Anyway, but if what I just described sounds like something you might be into, then absolutely go check it out. Oh, I should have shown this picture. So this is the kind of world you're going to live in, with short sleeves, lots of screens though, be aware of that, and people screaming into your ear, demanding that you help them, you prioritize them. But you have to stay professional, you have to stay cool, you have to stay calm as you're juggling all of these different emergencies happening all at the same time. Queens East, which is where we are, we're in the Queens East district of EMS response, is no joke. There's lots of emergencies happening simultaneously at any one time. So on scene, whether you are the dispatcher or the unit on scene, you have to be making snap decisions. This is no time to be pulling out your phone and asking Siri or Alexa or ChatGPT what you're supposed to do next. This is no time for you to be remembering or struggling to remember things. You have to know what to do and do it right away. For those of you thinking, I'll figure it out when I get there, no, you will not. I've used the word stress multiple times already. What happens to your brain when you're under real stress? The front half of your brain shuts down. It stops working. That's actually a feature of stress. And only the back half of your brain is still in operation, and you're relying on muscle memory. You're not going to be figuring things out. You'll be doing things as you trained. And if you didn't train properly in school, then you're going to be standing there like a deer in the headlights, not doing the best thing for your patient or for your partners or for yourself. So you have to be studying hard. On skills days, you have to step up. You cannot be using skills days to hide in the corner and watch your cat videos. You have to take initiative. If it's not your turn to practice a skill because the skills instructors are busy, then you have to grab your nearest classmate who's also not busy and go practice on yourselves. It's okay, you'll be supervised, okay? Because by absorbing these skills and rapid decision making internally, then when you're there in an emergency situation, and by the way, the skills exam at the end of the semester is also highly stressful, then you won't be relying on the front half of your brain, which had already shut down, but you'll be relying on your muscle memory to make the right decisions. So, examples of critical decisions. Which hospital do you take this patient to? Like I said, there may be specialty centers better for this patient than the nearest emergency department. Should the patient be sent to the closest 911 receiving facility, or can they survive a slightly longer trip to a more appropriate center? And all of this will be covered as the semester goes on. Don't do something to somebody just because you think it's cool, or you just learned it, or you want to show off your skills. You have to make sure you're doing the right thing for the right patient. The days of somebody screaming, "Somebody do something," is over for you. You are learning to be professionals. Professionals do the right thing for the right reasons. How do you know what the right thing is to do? You have to do what's called assessment. You have to properly assess your patient which is a fancy way of saying figure out what's going on, but do it in a professional, formalized way to make sure, and the formalized way is to make sure you didn't leave something out that's important. All of this you will be trained, we will teach you, but that's all we can do. You have to then take this information and practice, practice, practice. So, the emergency medical dispatcher sends the resources, the appropriate resources, to the emergency as they see it. But what kinds of resources? So, here are the tiers. Emergency medical responder, sometimes called first responder, but actually we're all first responders because they're not, it depends, the details of the situation may change who shows up first. So first responder was not a very good term for just one of them. Anyway, the responder, that's like firefighters, police officers, lifeguards, first aid offices. These are EMRs. So their level of training, they can give a band-aid, they can apply oxygen, they can lift. You know, think of what a firefighter can do for somebody on scene, or think of what a lifeguard can do for somebody at the beach, and that's emergency medical responder. Emergency medical technician is what you guys are trying to be, and that is it. Right. So that takes about 3 to 4 months. Takes about $1,000, or what is it now because of inflation? Anyway, it used to be called EMTB, but I guess they dropped that title for whatever the reason. Okay. Outside of New York City, there is the AEMT, so it's a little slightly higher. This is like an EMT, but they can do IVs, intravenous needles, they can do EKGs, and a few other things. They can give a few extra drugs, but we don't really have that level here in New York City. What there is paramedic. So this is the highest level of medical training that is possible on an ambulance, short of becoming a nurse or doctor. Paramedic training is about 1 full year, 12 months, and last I checked it was like $12,000. So if the EMT program here, if a typical EMT program is like $1,200 for inflation, then the paramedic program is more like $12,000, 12 months. And these guys are doing the IVs. EMTs learn about 8 different drugs they carry on the ambulance. Paramedics carry about 20 to 40 drugs, and we have to know everything about the drugs we give. It used to be that the main difference between EMT and paramedic was that the EMTs never do anything invasive, meaning the EMTs never put anything into the body. They can do everything outside of the body, like splinting, tourniquets, bandages, give medications that they apply without going invasive, so oxygen, medication by mouth. And then paramedics can go into the body with needles, with intubation, and they can do the EKG stuff. But the line between the two is slowly starting to blur ever so slightly, so it does change a little bit with each protocol update. In any medical emergency, the most important person in that room to the EMT is the EMT yourself. You are the most important person there to yourself. And it's not just for selfish reasons, but if you get hurt, if out of some heroic, dramatic inspiration, you do something unjustifiably risky and then you get hurt. Now there are 2 patients there, thank you very much. and now we got to send two more units, not just yours, but now there are two more units on the way. One for you, because your partner can't take care of a patient all by himself, and one for the patient that was your original patient. So no, you're not helping. And then if you get injured, your partner is left alone and now is doubly exposed to whatever the risks of the scene was. You are not helping. So the ultimate primary responsibility of the EMT is their own personal safety. After that, the second highest priority for the EMT is their partner. And then a distant third is patient, and then slightly beyond that, number 4 is bystanders. But really, you got to take care of yourself and your own. And we're going to drive this into your brain with every opportunity, myself and the other instructors. Once, and this is something you always check on continuously, BSI scene safety, body substance isolation, mask and gloves, and make sure the scene is safe. You're supposed to check for that at the beginning of the scenario, but then never stop checking for it. It always has to be the foremost thing in your mind. Now, after that, while that's going on, now you need to figure out what happened, and that's assessment. Because you can't do the right thing until you know what's wrong. And you can't know what's wrong until you check all the different parts, including the body parts and the story and the messages from bystanders, etc., until you finally understand what's going on. And now you can take care of the patient. On scene, your main responsibility is to stabilize the patient, meaning that if there's something that's going to kill them right now, right then, like within a minute, you have to stop it from happening, because you can't have the patient dying on you while you're transporting, right? So if something's going to kill the patient right there, you need to stop it from happening. And if you can't do it by yourself or with your crewmates, then you call for additional resources to help you stabilize. Once the patient is stabilized enough to move, then you move them to your ambulance, and it's not just a simple matter of picking up and go, because there's some skills involved, right? You have to do this safely for yourself and your crew and your patient. You have to do it so you don't make things worse, add extra problems on top of whatever else the patient is having, and you have to balance it with the need for speed. You're not going to go lights and sirens with every patient. Some patients don't need it, and by the way, everything you do in healthcare has side effects. When you go lights and sirens on an ambulance, what's the side effect? You might get into a car accident. Going lights and sirens increases your chance of getting T-boned at an intersection, or flipping over at a curve, or somebody running out into traffic because they weren't hearing you or seeing you. So you have to take that into account. That's transport. And then transfer of care is a critical part. Transfer to the emergency room, emergency department, because you have to do it in the appropriate way so that no important information is dropped or lost. And then finally, be a patient advocate. So what does being an advocate mean? Well, technically, the difference between an advocate and an activist is that an activist is a member of the community they're fighting for, and an advocate is not a member of the community they're fighting for. So if, I guess, a patient's family would be an activist, but since you're not part of the patient's family, next of kin, you're more like an advocate, but you're still looking out for the best interest of the patient. So, which means that even though you're doing everything according to the protocol, you're actually not done with your responsibility. Just because you got the pulse back doesn't mean you can stop caring about the patient. You have to worry about other things. For example, let's say this patient does have a legit medical emergency, but they are doing otherwise okay. So on the way out, you want to ask, like, do you need any of these things if they were an elderly patient? What if they forgot to ask about it because there was so much emotion and trauma? This person is having literally the worst day of their life. For you, it's a Tuesday. But anyway, the patient is being too distraught to worry about details like this. But you know that they're going to be in the hospital for a while. Maybe you should help them check that they're bringing all these things. Oh, what about if they're not elderly? What about everybody else? Well, think. If you had to be stuck inside the emergency room department for several hours, or be stuck in the hospital for several days, what would you like to have brought with you? What about a charger for your phone? How about that for a night, for a starter? So what else could you think about that the patient might need, even though it's above and beyond what's in the protocol for the actual emergency you're called for? But then after I said that, of course you have to do some time management, right? So would taking the time to gather these items having a negative effect on patient care? Like if the patient is in cardiac arrest and you're doing CPR and everybody else is doing advanced cardiac life support, okay, now worrying about their glasses and hearing aid is not a high priority. And getting to this patient to the hospital as soon as possible, lights and sirens justified, now that is a higher priority. See how this works? Okay. Before you leave, especially if the patient is living alone, would it make sense to lock their door when you leave? Otherwise, other than leaving the door wide open, and there are other issues that may come up, and the short way to think about it is, a thumbnail to use is, if you were a patient, what would you like to have done for you? Kind of like the golden rule. So to be a good EMT, you need to be smart, you need to be educated, which is what this class is for. You need to have street smarts, which only real life can teach you. And you need to be strong. How strong? Well, Americans are only getting heavier, sad to say. So you need to, and this goes all the way back to protecting yourself, right? Personal safety, and then crew safety, and then patient safety. So the stronger you are, the better you'll be able to lift your patient off the ground, off the bed, away from the bathroom, onto your stretcher, and then lift that stretcher all the way up to your ambulance, and do it safely and without making things worse. The heaviest patient I've ever had to lift was 360 pounds. And every EMS crew member I've ever told to, they always responded the same way, which is, "Oh, you poor baby." And then they would promptly tell me about patients they've had that were heavier. The most common career-ending injury in EMS is back injury and sciatica, and that is partly, not only, but partly because of bad lifting. Sometimes the person tried really hard and conscientiously to always lift well, but a lifetime of strain on the back, like 20 years, 25 years, finally caught up to them, and they had compression fractures of the vertebrae, or sciatica, nerve pinching, or herniated discs. So take care of your back. You only get one back, you don't get another one. So take care of yourself, which means if you cannot carry the legally required minimum of 125 pounds for yourself, then you need to be hitting the gym. And for those of you who can't afford the gym, or can't make the time to go to the gym, Do squats at home. Put something heavy in your backpack and do squats. Start slow, grow slow. Don't injure yourself with exercise, but like see if you can do 10 squats on the floor by yourself without stopping. And then if that you can do that, then tomorrow do 11, and then the day after tomorrow do 12, and you work your way up. And until by the end of this semester you can deadlift at least 125 pounds without injuring yourself. Good eyesight. So the American Disabilities Act does require some accommodation, but then there's this little known clause inside it where it says within reason, because in order to perform the job of an EMT, you need to know where you're going, right? You need to see where you're going. When you get a job as an EMT, most places now require you to drive half the time, which means you have to have a driver's license. And if you don't have one now, you have, checks watch, about 3 months to get a driver's license, because no EMT service is going to hire you without a driver's license. So half the time you'll be driving, which means you need to have good eyesight, which means take care of your eyes. Do your annual eye doctor check. Okay, color is an important piece of way to portray information, but also you need to see what the colors are of things coming out of the patient. Many of our assessments is evaluating the color of skin, the color of mucous membranes, the color of discharge, so that take good care of your eyes. And you are not Rambo, you are an important part of a system, but you work inside the system. So good communication skills between you and your crewmate, between you and the dispatcher and the rest of EMS, and of course between you and the nurse and the doctor at the ER, critical. Okay, what kind of person would you like showing up to your medical emergency, or your parents or your children's medical emergency? Somebody who look like this, or somebody whose pants are down by their thighs, their shirt is stained and ripped, they've got hairdo that looks like it's going to catch on fire. So you want to present an appearance that inspires confidence. And you may say, that's old school, or you may say, okay, boomer, but once people get to know me, they know I'll be good. Street smarts, right? Street smarts. What do you do out there in the real world? Do you wait until you know a person until you get to know a person to decide if they're worthy of your trust, or do you make snap judgments on their appearance? Just don't tell me. Just be honest for yourself. Do you judge somebody's competence by how they do, or by how they look? And before you say, well, I never judge somebody by their appearance. Okay, so you are an angel, you are a saint, but most of your patients do judge by appearance. And I'm going to tell you, medical theater makes a big difference. It's another way of saying placebo effect. If you're not sure what placebo effect means, look it up. It's powerful, very powerful placebo effect. So read about it all your own. Let me check the AI is not hallucinating. All right, I'll let this go. So medical theater is a kind of placebo effect. Just by looking competent or convincing the patient that you are competent will go a long way to helping the patient feel better. Also, by looking like you know what you're doing, the patient and their family members will be more compliant, will be more willing to help you help them. Whereas if you look like you don't know what the hell you're doing, that you look like you're going to be disrespectful and not caring, then the patient and their family members are going to start to fight you, resist you, and everything is going to get much, much worse. So professional attire, professional demeanor, professional posture. I don't mean professional posture as in ramrod straight marching posture. I mean like respectful posture, competent posture will go a long way to making the entire experience better for all involved. Remember that time you got away with something? It was a little white lie, or maybe it was a big lie, or you cheated, or you stole something and nobody caught you. And to this day, you smile to yourself, you smirk for yourself, and think, I got away with that one. And I guess karma doesn't exist, or that kind of a thing. Every time you get away with something, it changes you a little. You got away with a little thing, it changed you a little bit. But if you do this often enough, those little changes add up and you end up a different person than you started out. So other attributes of being a good EMT, and at this point it's turning into like street smarts and common sense. Active listening is actually not that. Most people don't practice active listening. They're not aware of it. Most interpersonal communications are about two people waiting for their turn to talk. And especially now with smartphones, most people just stare at their phone while somebody's trying to tell them something. So that maybe is the boomer in me, but I don't think that's good listening behavior. If you are talking to somebody you care about, you should put that phone away. But anyway, that's just me. We'll talk about good communication skills in another chapter. So being a good EMT means, like I said, good street smarts, being strong, but also knowledgeable about what the right thing to do is. And sometimes the right thing to do changes the more we as a species learn about science, about medicine, about health. So how are you supposed to know if like a protocol has changed or a technique has improved or anything like that? It's called continuing medical education. And this is what you look for, CME. Now, as an EMT, you don't have that much of a financial or legal pressure to attend CMEs, but pro tip, if you get a chance out of your busy schedule and life, you see a CME being presented by your ambulance service or your local hospital, and then the topic is interesting to you, like a refresher on how to deliver a baby or how to give intramuscular injection or what's going on under the covers when somebody's having a heart attack. Why not go check it out? And especially now after the pandemic, many of these CMEs are online via WebEx or Zoom. So you don't even have to leave your apartment. You don't even have to turn your camera on. So attending CMEs have gotten a lot more convenient, a lot more easier for the average person. So why not check it out? Stay on top of your industry, stay on top of your profession, find out what's the latest, and see and hear other people's opinions about what the right thing or the wrong thing has been to do. For those of you who are able to do this, then keeping up on publications like magazines, journals, many of the journals now moved online. So it's part of your profession. You're trying to be a professional. Most professionals have journals. So go check out subscribing to them and getting the latest updates on various things. Okay, so a lot of your partners out there will be all about experience, but they don't really have much book knowledge. And when that I mean by that is you tell them what like the latest recommendations are, and they say, don't worry about it. It's just whatever. This my old way works well with me. So this person has a lot of experience but not much knowledge, and they say experience is enough. Now, people fresh out of school may have a lot of book knowledge, but if they haven't been out there for a while, they will think that they're all that and they've got, they're going to show the world what the real thing to do, the real truth is, etc. I'm going to say you need both. To be the best kind of EMT, you need both. You need experience, of course, to know what's really going on the streets, but you have to know what the right thing to do is now. Every once in a while, I run into an old timer who still do things the old way, even though it was taken out of protocol. So being taken out of protocol means for whatever reason, and different people have different theories, but whatever reason, a method is no longer recommended to do for this situation. So you need both. Okay, how do you know? And then in order to stay up with your knowledge, show up for CMEs, show up for refreshers when it's time. As an EMT, you have to refresh every 3 or is it 4 years to make sure you relearn everything you forgot. So an extension of the golden rule is who would you want taking care of your loved one, your parents, your children? Who would you like to see coming through the door? As the semester comes to a close, to an end, look around the classroom, and for each person, ask yourself, would I want to see that one walking through my door, or would I rather see the other person walking through my door? Now, to be the kind of person that everybody wants to see walking through their door, what do you have to do to be that good of an EMT? Being an EMT doesn't mean you have to work on an ambulance. For right away, the first example you saw was being a dispatcher. Sometimes you become an EMT, but then you work for the fire department. And some people join the fire department through the EMT division because they want to end up over in the fire suppression side. Some people want to work as an EMT, but not in downtown Manhattan, but out there in the sticks, out there in the wilderness, being wilderness wildlife rescue, responding to mountains, ski patrol over at the resorts, EMS in the waters. So there are other services other than strictly ambulances on highways. And industrial settings, some industrial commercial centers have such a large footprint that they have to have their own separate EMS service. Queensborough Community College has their own EMTs they don't have an ambulance, but they've got everything else, and they will quickly respond once you call for help here on campus. The national parks, I said national parks, but like other official national parks, such as like the Statue of Liberty has a separate EMS service. The airports have a separate EMS service. And so you could end up, if you're interested, and if the stars align for you, you could end up at something other than a street-based city municipal service. There are also, what I should add here, there is a private ambulance agency. So there's the city EMS, and they are tied directly to the 911 system. They are contracted by, they're actually contracted by hospitals and then the hospitals have the contract to provide emergency services. But then, and that's what everybody thinks of when they call 911. But did you know there's a private ambulance service industry? And these are not always called by 911. They're often called by a separate private commercial number, and they respond to scheduled interfacility transports that are not that were not an actual emergency. Why is that the case? To call 911 is more expensive. So a private agency can provide the scheduled in advance routine pickup and drop off for cheaper. And since the patient is not expected to be in an actual medical emergency, but they could, like the patient is so sick that they could trip a medical emergency in the middle of a routine ordinary transport, which is why they cannot be taken by Uber or taxi or even an ambulette. They need to be taken by EMTs. For example, dialysis transport from nursing home to the dialysis center and back. That's a very common source of private ambulance contracts. There are some people who call the private ambulance agency because they don't want all the drama and noise of a 911 call. Every time 911 is called, the police have to show up too. It makes neighbors get nosy and ask questions. So instead, some people have this private number they call, and the ambulance comes, picks them up. It's a legit emergency, but they just didn't want 911 to get involved. So that's what the privates are for. Private agencies actually belong on this list because for most of you who want to get into EMS as a career, that's likely to be your first job. Throughout the semester, we're going to fill your head with dreams of being a lifesaver, responding lights and sirens, and lots of radios and boots clomping all over the place. But those jobs are coveted. They're the ones everybody wants, which means the competition for 911 response is higher. Meanwhile, private agencies will hire as many people as they can get because their profits are limited by the size of their staff. The more responders they get, the more contracts they can fulfill, the more money they make. So they're always hiring. So it's much easier to get a private agency job, therefore, and it's harder to get a 911 job. So for many of you, unless you know somebody who knows somebody, etc., then you're likely to end up in the privates first. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Most of us started out that way. Many of us start out this way, which is volunteering. So either they're brand new EMT, want to gain the experience, and they don't have to make money doing it. They join a volunteer agency who provides free EMS. How do they get their money? Through patients' health insurance, reimbursed for their efforts, donations by the community, other ways that nonprofits get money. Volunteering is also a way for people who already have a day job but still want to give back to the community. So they go find, and they've had a previous career as in EMS, so they go find their local volunteer agency and go help out. The best part of volunteering is that everybody there, well, in my experience, everybody there has been more forgiving and relaxed, laid back. The work schedules are much more relaxed. You don't have to work if you don't feel like it, that kind of a thing. Whereas if you're in a paid service, you when you're on contract, you got to show up or you're fired. Volunteering is not like that. Depending on where you live, also filters what kinds of opportunities are available to you. So another alphabet agency, NREMT, they've been in the professional news, the professional communications a lot lately, because they're having a greater influence on exam administration, and standards. So here's another alphabet agency to put on your piece of paper that you will be expected to know. I didn't tell you everything you needed to know about the NREMT. Where will you find everything you need to know about the NREMT? In your textbook, Chapter 1. Read that chapter. So, CME, Continuing Medical Education, sometimes when you show up for a CME, you get a lecture about a topic. Sometimes you get a call review. What happens is authority figures like agency officers or hospital officers will select some call reports. They're called PCRs, pre-hospital care reports, from the last month or so. They will redact out all the identifying information, and they will present the case to the audience, and then everybody there will talk amongst each other what was done well, what could have done better, and use it as a learning experience. Not only is the patient's identifying information removed, but the crew's identifying information is to be removed too, because quality improvement is not about punishing the crews who screwed up. That's taking care of mistakes. Addressing mistakes, levying disciplinary actions is between the crew and their supervisor. That's it. Nobody, initially. But quality improvement is not about that. It's not about assigning blame. It's not about administering punishment. It's about everybody else learning from somebody else's mistakes and everybody improving as a result. So you never know who was on that call, which crew members were actually involved. The non-public quality improvement is things like non-public quality improvement is when officers gather together over the stack of PCRs and other operational reports from the previous period and see what can be done better, which ones are signs of a systematic or systemic problem in the organization. Some errors are made because the crew screwed up. An EMT forgot the protocol, or their judgment was kind of like not the best. But sometimes mistakes are made because the system was set up to make that mistake possible or more likely. So it's time for the administrators, supervisors to think about it, realize it, and say, we got to change our process. We got to change we do business so this never happens again. This happens at the local level, agency level, local level, city level, county, state, and of course nationally too. So copies of the PCRs are shared not only with the insurance agency, because that's how you get the money back, but also with all of these administrative levels, all the way up to the state at the very least, for continuing quality improvement. There are 3 kinds of doctors an EMT will interact with on a regular basis, and a 4th one, but I will address that soon. So on the job, you're responding to a job, and then you have an issue come up. So instead of making your best guess and running with it, what you're really supposed to do is call medical control, or in here the slide says medical direction. Online medical control is the textbook definition, and here in New York City we call it OLMC, online medical control, or telemetry in New York City. So this doctor is sitting in an office next to a phone, and that's their job, to sit by the phone and talk to EMS crews as their calls come in. to answer questions, to clear up confusion, to make decisions. Sometimes a decision has to be made by the doctor and cannot be made by EMS. So that's why this person is there. So when you're on the job, when you're on a scene and you're not sure what to do next, you should call for online medical control. The second kind of doctor you interact with is when you arrive in the emergency room and you transfer responsibility of the patient to the hospital. You first talk to the triage nurse, whose job it is to decide which patient gets seen right away and which patients can wait. If you've ever been to the emergency room and you had to wait in the waiting room for hours and hours and hours, that's the triage nurse. Don't think of it as, oh my God, why am I here waiting for hours? Think of it as, well, I guess my problem is not that big of an emergency that they can afford to make me wait. Because if after explaining your situation, the triage nurse says, oh my God, come in right now. Okay, you're having a bad day. So think of it that way. After that though, the triage nurse signs your PCR saying the hospital now accepts responsibility for your patient, and then tells you which bed to put the patient in, so you go put the patient there. And then after a bit, the doctor passes by, either the resident or the attending of the ER, and say, okay, what you got? And you make a formal presentation to the doctor. That's the second kind of doctor you talk to. This is important because it's about continuity of care. The phrase continuity of care, that all the most important high priority information is shared from the EMS, the people who were there on scene, and the doctor who is now responsible for continuing care, appropriate care of this patient. The third kind of doctor is the medical director of your ambulance agency. You will almost never interact with this doctor unless you're in big trouble. I suppose if you did something exceptionally good that the agency wants to give you a special award or certificate, then the doctor will show up for a photo op and shake your hand and say congratulations. I suppose it never happened to me. I was never that good, but maybe that could happen. But it's more likely that if you do need to talk to that medical director of your agency, you screwed up something, and now they need to have a conversation with you. It doesn't mean you're fired. It just means that something very serious happened, and they just want to make sure you understand what happened, or they want to understand what happened, and they want to find out how to never let this happen again. And then finally, a fourth possible doctor you could run into, which is very, very rare, is on scene. There is an actual doctor on an ambulance whose job it is to respond to the worst of the worst situations. So I've never experienced that. I've only heard about it. I've heard over the radio that this doctoral unit is on the way to somewhere, and my partner and I are looking at each other ooh, they're in trouble now, stuff like that. But sometimes it's because the situation is really that crazy. But sometimes it means that crew really did screw up that badly that they need to send a doctor in person. Okay, was I being too negative about running into doctors? Most of the time your experience with doctors will be positive. The medical director, medical control, OLMC, is your most likely situation. No, actually, transfer of care to the ER doctor is your most common situation. You'll do it almost every time. It's a positive experience. Many times the ER doc says, cool, and then good job, etc. Sometimes I had to call medical control, and that was it for me. I never met the other two kinds of doctors. Okay. Outside of New York City, EMTs can do other things, especially in communities where they don't have as many healthcare resources as we do here in the Great Apple, the Big Apple. So sometimes those EMTs can show up to give advice, to survey a room, like to make the room childproof, or to give advice on like warning areas for geriatric patients. They can participate in vaccination programs because EMTs are trained to give intramuscular injections, which is how vaccines are given. They may be recruited as the eyes, ears, and feet of disease surveillance operations. We don't do that here in New York City because all of these roles are filled by somebody else. So they only need EMTs to do what we do here, which is ambulance work. But if you are thinking, or if there's possibility that after this program you go off with the rest of your life and you end up somewhere outside of a big city, then you could end up qualified to participate in these different initiatives. If you're very, very lucky, you may be asked to participate in research, but you have to really know the right person and be at the right place for that kind of a thing. Otherwise, most of our experience with research is to read what other people have done. And if you're anything like me, I would jump to the abstract and then jump to the conclusion, and then pretty much I'm done with it, because we're all very, very busy people, and research is not really my focus. I am a teacher in a community college, but I'm in the lecturer role, not the professor role. The main difference is I don't have to do any research to be a lecturer. Professors have to publish or perish. The flip side of that is then I don't get paid as much, but I think that's a fair trade. I don't have the stress of doing research, and then so for less money I can have a less stressful life. Okay, that said, there are ways to do research. A hypothesis is making your justification for doing the research in the first place. You have a question, you're wondering something. I wonder if this, or why. You're asking the big question, why? Why is this happening this way? So you come up with a hypothesis to try to explain it, and then before you go spend money and time doing the study, first find out if somebody else did it first, right? Because you don't want to be wasting time if you find out that actually this question's been pretty well firmly established. But if in your personal opinion you feel like what's been done so far is not enough, or is out of date, or they didn't think of this approach or this twist in the story, then you can turn that into your own research project. So you need to gather evidence, but how do you do that? Well, you apply for a grant, because this stuff takes money and time. So you need somebody to pay you to do that. And then you get your evidence, but then you have to do it the right way, because when you do research, there's a million different ways that bias can enter your data. And if you don't properly screen or care or do what you are expected to do to prevent bias, then your data becomes garbage and nobody will trust it. So there's a very strict and formalized way to perform research so that your data in and your results out are believable. So this believability is what researchers really call quality of information, and there are different levels of quality of information, but already these two slides are pretty much above and beyond the requirements of being an EMT in New York State, so we won't get into it. And then for those of you who go on to actually get a chance to do research, then you will be trained on this kind of this kind of skills in a much more rigorous fashion. Okay. So there are many ways to reduce bias. Before you go and think to yourself, oh, I'm not biased, the very fact that you're saying it means you are biased. You have the worst kind of bias, which is bias that you're not aware of. Everybody has bias. So the first step in reducing your bias is to become aware of it. I am biased. I know I'm biased. I've lived a certain way. I've spent most of my life in certain parts of the world, so I have a bias from that experience. I haven't lived every life in every part of the world, so of course I have bias. I do have a political leaning, and so that causes a bias. I am pro-science. I am pro-vaccination. That creates a bias. Just everything causes a bias. To claim that you don't have one, it makes you the most vulnerable to having biases. There's lots and lots of different biases. You can go to your favorite search engine and search for bias, and there's like a long list of different things. So the first step of a good researcher is to recognize their own biases and then try to find ways to minimize the bias effects on their data and then their conclusions. Different kinds of studies you'll run into. These are pretty much above our pay grade. The one you really want to look for, the best kind of research, it doesn't mean it's a slam dunk like truth is truth, but the best kind of research, the highest quality research, is randomized controlled trials. This is where you take the group of subjects and you divide them into at least two groups. One of them you actually give the therapy or the change. The other one you don't, but you give them like something fake, like a placebo pill, and then you see what's the difference. And then if there is a significant difference, and then you can conclude that yes, the therapy you're experimenting on is actually helpful, etc. All those studies about foods, like eat this food, it'll help you in that way. Most of those are not randomized controlled trials. Those are observational studies. Observational study is when you watch a bunch of people, see what they do, record it, and then see if there's any effect. The main difference is that with observational studies, there's no control group to block for placebo effect. Placebo effect is incredibly powerful, ridiculously powerful. Everybody is vulnerable to it. If you don't control for it, your conclusions are almost invalid. Then how are observational studies worth doing? Well, when they show a correlation means two things happen around the same time, then it justifies future studies that are randomized controlled. So when you see a news report saying, eat this food because it makes you live longer, don't immediately say, oh, therefore it's true. Well, it's just a correlation. After all, length of life is affected by 1,000,001 different factors, not just whether the people ate that food or not, right? Like where you live, the air you breathe, the kind of jobs you do, all of that plays into length of life. So to say a food is been proven to extend or shorten life, that's ridiculous. But if an observational study says this food seems to correlate with longer life after trying to account for all the other possible factors, then instead of proving it's true, what it does is it justifies further research. That's all it does. Why do the titles of those research reports make it sound like it's so definitive, it's so slam dunk? Well, those article titles were written by non-scientists, by social media influencers whose only job really is to gain clicks. They're clickbait. They take a very well worded, carefully worded cautiously worded research report, and they think nobody's going to click on me if I put the title like that. So they change the title, they play up the findings, they over exaggerate in their write up so that people will click on their articles, and that's what we're dealing with here. There will be an entire chapter, actually 3 separate chapters on special issues. A chapter on special issues itself, a chapter on geriatrics, and a chapter on pediatrics. So take these slides as more of a sneak preview trailer for those chapters that are kind of in the later half of this semester. Anyway, the Americans with Disabilities Act not only applies to you students out there who may be qualified for an accommodation, but also for your patients too, right? So your patients have rights, and just because they are disabled, not my term, this legal term here, doesn't mean that that you can ignore it. So you want to pay special attention, and that's pretty much it. So when those chapters show up, you'll want to pay extra attention to it. All right. So the rest of this slide is a recap of everything I just said. So I'm not going to do that for you. You can read this for yourself, all right? But anyway, thank you for sitting with me. It's been like over an hour. My throat is sore. And so it's time for you to take a break if you haven't already, because we need to go on to Chapter 2. So see you in the next video.